Hello and welcome back to a new UiPath demo. Now that we've covered the basics of data table variables, let's learn how to use them when working with Excel spreadsheets. We'll start our demo by reading data from two Excel files that have different extensions. On this occasion, we'll see which UiPath Studio activities suit each file format. We'll use two data table variables to store and then filter the information in those files. In the end, we'll write the data to a new Excel file. Let's begin. A new project called Filtering Companies Before 2005 has already been created. First, we'll read the information in an Excel spreadsheet that has the .xlsx format. And then we'll move on to a .xls file. Please note that both files are included in the project folder. We'll retrieve the information in the .xlsx spreadsheet using the read range activity in the workbook category. This activity reads the value of an Excel range and stores it in a data table variable. Workbook activities can interact with .xls and .xlsx files. We can drag and drop it in our sequence. For the .xls file, we'll use a different read range activity, namely the one in the Excel app integration category. Excel activities can interact with .xls, .xlsx, and .xlsm files. Before adding it to the Designer panel, we need an Excel application scope container. Let's rename the workbook read range activity from before to include the file type in the title. We'll browse for our .xlsx file and then remove the range in order for the entire sheet to be read. Next, we'll select the Output Data Table field and press Ctrl+K to create a new variable. We can call it Output DT1. Note that the Add Headers option is checked. This means that the activity will consider the first row in the range column header definitions. Let's move on to the Excel application scope, which will read the .xls spreadsheet. We'll rename it accordingly and browse for the file. Then we'll select the read range activity and create a new variable called Output DT2 in the Output Data Table field. We need to use this variable throughout the entire workflow, so we'll open the Variables panel to change its scope. Alright, let's quickly open our files to see what they look like. We'll switch to the Project tab, expand the Data folder, right-click the Data1xlsx file, and select Open. The first file contains the founding year of some companies, their name, and their revenue. Let's open the second file. Note that it comprises the same type of information, but the columns are arranged in a different order. Okay, now that we've read the data, let's filter all of the companies that were founded earlier than 2005. We'll add two filter data table activities, one for each variable. Let's rename the first one. Now we can open the Filter Wizard. We'll enter our variable in both the input and the output data table fields, since the companies founded after 2005 aren't necessary. Now, we'll set the filtering rule. In the Filter Rows section, let's make sure that the Keep Radio button is selected. The filtering column is founding year. This field is case sensitive, so we need to type the exact name of the column. Our operator is less than, and the value is 2005. Notice that 2005 is written with two decimal values, as the comparison is made using values of double type. Let's move now to the next tab, Output Columns. This tab provides the possibility to reorder the columns. Let's place the company column first, followed by revenue, and then by founding year. Let's rename the activity and then repeat those steps for the second variable. Once again, the input and the output data table fields contain the same variable. In this file, the column name is different, founding. However, the condition is the same. Let's go to the Output Columns tab and rearrange the columns as we did for the previous variable. Again, Let's make sure that the names of the columns are the correct ones. Now that our two variables contain the required data, we need to join the information in them. Since there are some discrepancies between the column names, let's use a build data table activity and create a new variable named filtered companies. We'll call the first column company, leave the string type as it is, and disable blank cells. The second column is called revenue, and it holds data of the string type as well. We'll also uncheck null and update the max length to 100. And we've reached the final column. Let's call it founding year and set the data type to integer. Next, we'll add a for each row activity, which fulfills the same role as for each, but it's only used with data table variables. Since we want to collect the rows of two variables, we'll use two for each row activities. Let's also quickly capitalize row for our two activities. Perfect. The first one will add the rows in output dt1 to the filtered companies variable using the row.itemArray method. The method converts the data in each row to an array item and then adds it to filtered companies variable. OK, let's move on to the output dt2 variable. The steps that we need to complete are the exact same ones. Alright, all of the rows are stored in a single variable. The data must now be written to an Excel file. The output folder contains a different .xlsx file, which is filled with some gibberish data. We'll use the Excel write range activity, which must be placed inside an Excel application scope container to ensure that the whole file will be overwritten. Next, we'll indicate the file to which we want to write the data. And this is it. Let's run the workflow and see what happens. Note that the activities inside an Excel application scope container can be performed while the Excel file is open, while the workbook activities require that the file is closed. And it worked! This concludes our demo on working with Excel files and data tables. Before we end the video, let's quickly recap what we've learned. We used different read range activities for each file extension type. For the .xlsx, we used a read range activity from the workbook category. Whereas for the .xls file extension, we used the read range activity found in the Excel app integration category. We added two filter data table activities, one for each variable. In the first activity, we added our output dt1 variable in both the input and the output filter wizard fields. We selected the Keep Radio button option and configured the condition to only keep values having founding year value smaller than 2005. We also rearranged the column order from the Output column tab inside the Filter wizard. We followed the same steps for the Output dt2 variable. We set the column order from the Output column tab identically to the previous activity. To tackle the issue of column name discrepancy when combining the two data tables, we used a new Build Data Table activity where we created a new variable called Filtered Companies. To collect the values of our two variables and store them in a singular new variable, we used a for each row activity developed specially for variable processing. To convert the data from each row to an array item, we used the row item method. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time, and until then, happy automation!